Jumping right into a completely objective breakdown of the escalating geopolitical tensions between Iran, Israel, and America. We're going to map out exactly how we got to this point, what's actually happening on the ground right now, and what this incredibly complex web of events means for all of us across the globe. You know, imagine three of the world's absolute heavyweight military forces facing off in a single theater of conflict. The skies are literally filling with missiles, stock markets are crashing in real time, and vital global oil supplies are totally stalling out. This massive wave of global anxiety is exactly why everyone, everywhere, is asking this terrifying question. Are we actually on the brink of World War III? Well, to find out, we need to strip away all the noise and just look directly at the facts. Okay, let's look at the first part of this, the beginning of enmity, how 1979 changed everything. Believe it or not, before 1979, diplomatic relations between Iran and Israel actually existed. But the 1979 Iranian Revolution completely shifted the regional dynamics, basically drawing a hard, permanent line in the sand. That event kicked off decades of indirect shadow wars and proxy conflicts. And it's really only recently that we've crossed a dangerous threshold where those long-held shadows have exploded into direct, open military confrontation. To really wrap our heads around this without taking any sides, we've got to look at two totally immovable geopolitical stances. From Israel's perspective, Iran's advancing nuclear program is seen as an absolute existential threat to their national security, period. Conversely, Iran's perspective is deeply rooted in a fundamental, persistent opposition to Israel's presence and policies within the region. So you have these two completely opposed, unyielding stances just clashing head-on. Moving on to the next phase here. America's role, alliances, and frictions. Obviously, the US is right in the thick of this. America acts as Israel's primary and most powerful ally, and they coordinate incredibly closely on defense and military strategy. But at the exact same time, the US has, well, they've been engaged in years of severe escalating friction with Iran. That stems from major disagreements over Iran's nuclear development, heavy economic sanctions, and constant battles over regional influence. The US is deeply, inherently tangled up in this whole shebang.
And all that messy historical entanglement, it just brought us to a massive tipping point. This long simmering friction recently snapped right into action. We saw coordinated strikes by US and Israeli forces targeting Iranian military installations. Now, in the past, responses might have been indirect, but this time, Iran retaliated directly with its own massive aerial barrage of missiles and drones. The conflict literally stepped out of the shadows and straight into the sky.
Now, for the mechanics of it all. War of technology, missiles versus air defense.
This is not just a traditional battlefield anymore, it's a super high-stakes test of modern military engineering. Iran has relied really heavily on an offensive strategy, deploying long-range ballistic missiles and these highly coordinated drone swarms. To counter that, Israel utilizes a defensive shield, specifically highly advanced multi-layered air defense networks designed to intercept those threats in midair before they ever make impact. It's essentially a real-time, live-fire test of modern military tech.
But look, the reality of conflict is rarely perfect. Even with these incredible billion-dollar technological shields and highly advanced offensive weapons in play, the data confirms a pretty sobering truth. Neither side has been completely immune. Despite all the money invested in defense and precision, both nations have suffered tangible, physical damage. Which brings us to the broader impact, the world sphere, global economic fallout. Why does this matter to you and me? Because if this escalation continues, the ripple effects are going to hit the entire global economy. We are looking at the very real threat of drastically surging oil prices, massive disruptions to international trade, and heavily threatened maritime routes. And when those things happen, stock markets tumble and broad economic instability follows like clockwork. The financial health of the entire world is directly tied to the stability of this one specific region. A perfectly terrifying example of this global vulnerability is the Strait of Hormuz. It's kind of like a giant geopolitical valve. It's a vital choke point for international trade where a massive percentage of the world's oil flows right through this tiny, narrow waterway. Any military tension near there immediately panics worldwide markets because if that route gets halted, global energy supplies are instantly choked off. Let's tackle the ultimate question. Is this World War III? The current status and diplomatic push. So what's the actual consensus from the experts? Well, officially, no, we are not in World War III. However, experts are warning that the line separating us from it is incredibly thin. If other major global powers get pulled directly into the fray, if all these overlapping alliances trigger broader military commitments, the situation is going to become exponentially more disastrous. It's a localized conflict right now, sure, but it has a highly combustible global potential. Right this very second, we are in a highly sensitive, totally volatile state. Ceasefire attempts have been made, but almost immediately, both sides have accused the other of violations. We're seeing constant, urgent international appeals for diplomacy. The entire future of this region, and honestly, potentially the global economy, hangs incredibly delicately in the balance. It rests entirely on whether these leaders choose further military escalation or real diplomatic resolution.
As we wrap up this explainer, we really can't forget the human element behind all these grand geopolitical strategies. History has this brutal way of constantly teaching us a harsh truth. Starting a war is incredibly easy, but ending it, that's immensely difficult. And behind every single missile fired, behind every drone launched, and every air defense system activated, it is always the innocent civilians on the ground who bear the deepest pain and the absolute heaviest cost.
Right now, the whole world is basically holding its collective breath, waiting to see if diplomatic solutions can somehow win out over destruction. Based on the history, the messy alliances, and the incredibly advanced technology we've just broken down, what are your thoughts? Where do you honestly think this geopolitical crisis is heading next? Will cooler heads prevail, or are we marching towards something much larger? Keep learning, keep questioning everything, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.